So Romeo and Juliet would have to be, I think, for all dancers, one of the most loved ballets. Great story, so many wonderful productions. And the one that we'll be showing is the most recent production that the company did with Graeme Murphy back in 2011. But before that, of course, we did the John Franco production, which we also still have in repertoire, which the company did in the 1970s, but it was actually created in the 60s. And, you know, magical. There's the Macmillan, the Cranko, John Neumeyer did a production. I mean, there are many memorable productions. What do you think it is that people love about this ballet?
If you ask any music director in the world about that, of course, we are going to say the music. But I think also if you ask our audiences and the dancers themselves, it is the music that makes it, no matter what production, such an incredible piece of music to dance to. So I remember my first performances with the Australian Ballet when I joined the company were of Romeo and Juliet, not the Murphy production, and we first did it in a house where the acoustic for the dancers, so the music that the dancers heard was not great. So what they were hearing, the orchestra was largely under the stage, so what the dancers heard was not a great representation. And then we took it to Brisbane, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember being grabbed by principal dancers afterwards saying, after Act 1, saying, we are so inspired because of the sound, the music that they were getting out of the pit. For musicians, it is always a joy and it's an honour as well to play Prokofiev. He's one of the greatest composers of all times, and in terms of full-length ballets that we do, one of the best pieces of music to play for a whole variety of reasons. So it is music of the highest quality as well as being ballet music of the highest quality. It is the first full-length work that Prokofiev wrote when he returned to the Soviet Union, just prior to the start of the Second World War. He had spent a lot of time abroad, but like many Russian composers in that period, was always torn between what he felt, and his music is intrinsically Russian, between his musical language and what he'd grown up with, versus what was happening politically in the country and how he might have felt about things politically. He returned to Russia, he composed this piece. Interesting also musically is that it was messed around with. So if you think of that period, any artwork that was created, ballets as well, had to be approved by a committee to make sure that they were politically correct and in line with the politics of the Soviet Union. And that included a composers committee. And so Prokofiev's original score, although it's in ideas and musical themes, and some of the musical language is his, it was actually reorchestrated, so it's less original Prokofiev than Cinderella is. So it's much lusher and more romantic than his actual musical idiom. Now that's, in a way, some of the things that people love about it and why it's so gorgeous to dance to. It is incredibly romantic feeling score, although it was written in the 20th century, but one of the best pieces of music ever composed.
And I think you worked really closely with Graeme when he was doing this production.
Yes.
Because he didn't absolutely use all of the music, and he did sort of, as all choreographers tend to, sort of slice and dice. But he was very much guided by you in that process. Was that an interesting process to go through?
Yes, I mean, he and Janet sequestered themselves, I think, first with the score and with recordings, and we spoke a lot about recordings that I love particularly, because whilst Graeme can score read, of course he's into deciding and thinking about his creative process is via recordings. So we talked a lot at that stage, and then they would send me thoughts, like any piece of music if you're making cuts to something. You have to make sure that the basic musical grammar and flow is not interrupted, and he wanted to make some quite significant changes. But he's a choreographer who's so musical and has such great musical intuition. So it's always easy working with Graeme, someone like yourself as well. No, because your intuition, even if you, in a musicological sense, aren't analysing the architecture of a piece in the way I would and think about it, Graeme, in this case, his ideas and his intuition and feeling about the architecture of the whole score was really, really strong. So he didn't need a huge amount of guidance. It's really, from a musical, if you think of a language equivalent, I had to say, well, you can't actually stop and put your full stop in the middle of that sentence and then start halfway through this next paragraph and have it make sense. It doesn't work that way. We did discuss all of those issues, but so many of the greatest moments, I can't say all, because for me it's a bit like Sleeping Beauty. I wouldn't know what to leave out because so much, it's all great music, so you're making choices. But in terms of his storytelling and the version of the story that they wanted to tell, which is quite contemporized in many respects, he chose every bit of music that he needed to do. We didn't need to debate or argue about things. It was just making sure that it made sense.
And I think, look, for the audience, it's really interesting because this is quite a unique and a very individual production of Romeo and Juliet, and it's something that would be a really great context once you've seen this production, then maybe to get onto YouTube or onto other websites, other company websites, and look at the Cranko production or look at the Macmillan production and see how different choreographers have approached this, what we think of as a very universal story, in a different way. So, some homework for after seeing this performance.